Coming up on this episode of Discover Health Podcast.
We're great at keeping promises to other people, but what about to ourselves? Now, I'm going to do that every day for 60 days. Are you? This is one of my favorite lines is your future is hidden in your daily routine. So, what do you
That's
want?
a good
Who do
one.
you want to be a year from now? Or 5 years or 10 years? What kind of person do you wanna be? What do you
Hmm.
wanna be doing in your life? What are important things that you wanna be doing in your life? Is your daily routine getting you there or going to get you there? And so if it's not, then make some changes, and you gotta be just real intentional about it.
Welcome to the Discover Health Podcast, where we explore the power of gut health, nutrition, and lifestyle to help you feel your best every day. I'm Dr. Josh Sharp, your guide on this journey to better digestion, more energy, and overall well-being. Ready to start discovering? Let's hit the trail. Welcome back to another episode of Discover Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Joshua Sharp, and joining me today is Dr. Allison McCune Davis, and she's an author. She's a traditional naturopath, and she's a mom of 5 who spent the last 25 years helping women reclaim their health and energy through natural, holistic practices. She's an author, and her book is called 60 is a Good Start, A Powerful Body, A Purposeful Life, and a Plan to Make It Happen. And in that book, she guides women, especially in the midlife stages and beyond, to see aging as a powerful new beginning through her body work, brain work, and world work framework. And she also has a 60-day DARE program that we're going to get into a little bit later. But thank you so much, Dr. Allison, for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So people may not know this. Some people may know this already, but you were working as a television producer. And I know for a lot of people, they think it's just a straight line. You go right from TV producer to naturopathic medicine. I think that's, next logical step for a lot of people. But maybe for those people that aren't aware of some of the twists and turns in there, how does one go from television production into the natural health world?
Well, I guess I grew up loving photography. And so when I went to college, TV film production was the natural, major to go into, which I loved. And what I really loved was the PBS world, documentary style, which was about educating people through the TV medium. And so I did that in Texas and then moved to LA because it was, New York or LA if you wanted to kind of go further. So I liked the weather in LA better. So I went out there and just, worked. I started out in the special effects. We worked at the largest special effects house at that time in LA for, we had big clients like Star Trek Next Generation and Max Headroom. I mean, if you're old enough to remember that, that was kind of a cult show, and like Prince videos and things like that. So that was fun. But then my real love was PBS. So I finally got back to that and produced a series there, and then ended up LA's an expensive place to live. PBS, was always, you're doing it on a shoestring. So I wanted to make some more money and went to ABC and was a computer graphics producer for quite a while before I moved back to Oklahoma, which is where I grew up.
That's
So,
great.
yes. So,
So
so while
now
I was
you're in
out there,
Oklahoma. Yeah. Okay.
While I was out there, I guess I moved back here at age 35, but I guess no, it was about 33, I think. I was living in this little apartment complex, and there was this lady there. She was kind of an acquaintance, older than me, and I was telling her about this sort of aggravating condition that kept sort of popping back up that I would solve with, over-the-counter stuff from the drugstore. And she said, "Oh, you have to go to my TCM doctor." And I was like, "What's that?" My father was a surgeon, so I grew up, in a medical household, but not, I don't think, that much different than most people in our country. And so she said, traditional Chinese medicine doctor. And I was just like, oh my gosh, my dad would flip, but yeah, let's go. Well, that sounds pretty interesting. he was really busy. I remember it took like 6 weeks to get in, and he did all this muscle testing and, figuring out what was going on, and ultimately he said, "Well, I want you to take these herbs for like 3 or 4 months and get off dairy for a year. You might be able to get back on, but, we'll have to wait and see." I was able to get back on, but I did realize I was eating dairy at every single meal. Terrible diet, cereal and milk for breakfast, cheese and crackers, pasta and cheese. That was just kind of my diet. And so that was my first introduction to something natural that grew out of the ground, herbs, and then working with diet that could heal. I just saw that the body wants to heal. We got to give it that space to do that, which is what he was helping me learn to do. So that was my first introduction. And then I, moved back to Oklahoma, got married, started having children, had my first at 37 and then 40 and then 42. I have 5 kids. And so after that third one, my immune system just tanked. And I was getting sick, like flu symptoms, like every 6 weeks. And I had these 3 little kids. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. I had quit working. I was a stay-at-home mom. And I just was like, I can't do this job of being a mom, getting sick all the time. What is going on? So since I had, gone to that guy out in California, I had also little by little been reading and researching and talking, just really getting into that whole world. And I found my first naturopath doctor, which, by the way, I don't call myself a doctor because, my father was a surgeon. There's some people do. Mine is a traditional naturopath certification. It is not, I did not go to 4 years of medical school. So the terminology is very confusing for a lot of people, but I always like to make that differentiation. But anyway, the one I went to had gone to medical school. It was interesting. He was a pharmacist for 10 years, and then he just was like, no, I can't do this. Went back to medical school and got his, doctorate in naturopathy. Anyway, I found him. That was probably 25 years ago. And just, we did all the tests, the blood tests, the poop tests, the hair follicle for, heavy metals, the saliva for sex hormones, the urine for neurohormones, did everything, and realized my gut health was all out of balance. Too much bad bacteria, not enough good. Thyroid was off. Adrenals, as he said, were shot, which, after having 3 kids, maybe later than a lot. I don't know. That could have been a factor. But anyway, I kind of spent my 40s healing and just, naturally. Like he could have, as a pharmacist, given me prescription drugs, but like he did both depending on kind of what you wanted. But I had at that point been like, no, if we can do this with natural herbs, then let's do it, which we did. So, and diet and all that stuff. So, I was just, just increasingly fascinated with how incredible that is and how incredible the human body is, that, it can heal, and if we just do the right things to put it in that position to heal. So my 40s were kind of spent doing that. And, I wasn't in the TV business anymore, although, I'm still fascinated with social media and all that kind of stuff. But so then and then I spent my 50s. Well, we adopted my son from Russia when I was 46, and then at 50 we adopted our daughter from Ethiopia. So there's the 5 kids. But so in my 50s, I started teaching other women, just like on the side, just kind of as an outlet, whether online or in person, just about natural health and the things I'd learned. And then it was in my late 50s that I got my naturopath certification. So
Interesting. So quite a transition there.
yes.
TV production, living in Los Angeles, Oklahoma, homeschool mom,
Yes.
and then, solving your own health issues or working with a
Or my
pharmacist
kids.
of all things. Yeah. To
I felt
solve
like
your.
my house was a lab. If this will
I,
work.
yeah. So going to chiropractic, I went to chiropractic school, And going to chiropractic school, I look back and I feel very sorry for my family because they were the test dummies, the practice
Exactly.
patients for everything I was learning. And we got to figure out if this is going to work or if this is going to put you in a wheelchair. So we'll try it on our family first. And that's a great way to do things.
Yeah.
That's why God gave us a family, is to test
Yeah.
things out on. So
Mhm.
very thankful for them and what they've put up with, the ones that survive. So very
Yeah.
thankful.
Isn't that funny?
So as you are learning these things, things from a traditional Chinese medicine doctor, from, a bit more of a natural minded pharmacist, were you feeling like any pushback or any type of, what are you doing from your
Oh,
own
yeah.
family?
Oh my gosh, yes. Not my immediate family. My husband's
Okay.
really pretty open to kind of whatever I'm doing in that world, but like I said, my father was a surgeon and he's died since then, but he died in '05, so he was around. And my mother-in-law was an OBGYN. And we ended up our first baby was a C-section, and then I did this whole turnaround in my mind about how babies could be born.
Hmm.
And so the next 2 were home births after they were VBACs, after the C-section, and I mean, she didn't speak to us for, like, 3 weeks after that first one, and we didn't tell anybody either. We couldn't. We just like, having a baby is just such a big deal. It's so personal, and then here we were, going to have a VBAC home birth, you know, I needed my mental state to be in this, very positive. I was the only people that knew were just a few, and they were the supportive people in my life. Had I had all these doctors saying, "What are you doing?" That wouldn't have been good. So she finally came around, though. She's a
Well,
great mother-in-law.
if she
But
wants to see the grandkids,
oh yeah,
then
I know. What are you gonna do?
gotta come around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that can be such difficult waters for families to navigate whenever
Yes,
you
it
have a
is.
different mindset
Yes.
about health decisions, especially nowadays. I feel like the battle lines have been drawn on so many issues out there.
So many.
And
It's
so that can be,
political now.
oh, absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
amazing, yeah.
Yeah. We were blessed enough to be able to have both of our kids at home. My
Mhm.
wife is a very strong person. She's way stronger than me, I will freely admit. I have no problem admitting that. And so being there for that was an amazing experience.
It is.
But, there's quite a few people that thought we were crazy. And I'm
Well, I
sure
know, they're same, absolutely, absolutely, but, one of my big things is, just being able to I think this goes for, having a baby or deciding to homeschool or deciding what you're gonna do about your health is your you can call it intuition, your connection to God, your prayers and what do you hear back, what signs do you see along the way. All of that is so key on these big decisions that you're making in your life for you, for your children, all of that. And I just, I would research something, multiple subjects, um, controversial subjects, I would research it as much, and then there would be a point where I would be like, this is what I'm going to do. And I wouldn't and sometimes that took even years to continue to research, continue because it's hard. You're having to dig deep to figure out, where do you stand on certain things and how are you gonna live your life and how and these children you're bringing up, you wanna do the best for them. And so, yeah, so I think, and there will be people that wanna go against that, but you just, once you get to that position of, "This is what I believe in," and, you know, we can just not talk about it with those people, and you start to realize who's on your side and who's gonna support you and love you through it, and then those people that are not, and you just don't have the conversations.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was gonna ask you if you had any advice. Especially, I think it's very difficult when people find, like, if you have a family member or yourself and you're going through a health struggle, a health challenge, but you're deciding to go a more natural route. You're seeing a natural health practitioner or you're not using drugs and surgery to try to manage that condition, I think you can face a lot of judgment for those
Absolutely.
decisions. And a lot of people look at you and why don't you just go to a real doctor, or why don't you just act right and do what you're supposed to do and take the pills?
Yeah.
Um,
You
what
have to get
advice would
you
you
have
have for somebody that's
I
facing those struggles?
yeah,
Sorry.
m it would be to you got to develop a good support system. I remember, let's see, it was probably I was probably about, I don't know. Well, when I first moved back to Oklahoma, so I was 35 and I was already going down this path. And I met a friend who was the same way. We were just like lockstep on, we both had little babies at the time. And so, she was probably my first support system. And then we found this really cool Indian herbal lady actually, it was up in Kansas City, and
Okay,
we would
cool.
travel to see her, a couple times a year, and, so this was my first support system, and then over time, you just start meeting people, and then there was this one woman that was a naturopath, like, from the same place I got mine, that I met, you know gosh, I think I was like late 49, 50, something like that. And she started this group of ladies that went to coffee weekly in the evening, and there might be 4 of us, there might be 12 of us. It just, the week it just changed each week, and there was no real agenda. We just went and talked about this subject, natural health, these herbs, these oils, this diet, just all the things. And people would talk about what worked for them, people would ask questions, and so I think you have to seek out these people, and they're there. I mean, we live in a little town of 50,000 people in the middle of Oklahoma. And, so then through my 50s, I had a monthly group. I haven't been doing it in the last couple of years because I've been focused on this book and stuff. Um, but I do have like Facebook group that I've had for like 15 years where people are in there. But, we were in person too, and we would meet monthly and just for the same thing. So, and people would come and be like, wow, I didn't know you guys were here. We would laugh and say, yeah, we feel like we're the underground.
You have to like wear a trench coat and a hat and, keep a
So you
newspaper up
just,
and
and it's kind of hard, but I think honestly, I would, whenever I'm looking for something, I'm going to start praying for it first. You know, God, bring me like the people I
yeah.
need in my life to be supportive in this area that I can learn from or help them or, whatever. So I think a support system's huge because if you're facing that you believe in your heart so strongly these certain, natural ways of living, but you're just surrounded by that's a tough road. You got to have support.
It is.
And
And
even if you got to find it online, I mean it's not that hard. You can find stuff online and
yeah, you can.
groups and
And I totally agree. I think the idea of community is one that we personally overlooked so much. And we didn't do it intentionally. We just didn't understand the power of it. But I guess in some ways we did it intentionally. My wife struggled with Lyme disease and some chronic illness. And, obviously we were weird having babies at home.
Mhm.
And so we were really careful about who we let into that world and let know,
Absolutely.
because their initial, well, why don't you go to the doctor? Why don't you?
Oh,
Well,
I
because
know.
we don't want to be put on antibiotics for
Mhm.
now until forever. And
Right.
we understand the damaging effects of that and the dangers it's causing its own problems.
Mhm.
We just didn't align with that treatment and that style. And so we were pretty closed off.
Yeah.
And I think we really missed out on a lot of aspects of healing. And I think you're probably familiar with Dr. Stephen Porges, the polyvagal theory.
Actually, no,
And
I'm not. No, I'm not.
okay, I would recommend it,
Write
but
that down. Tell me
yeah,
again, what's his name?
Dr. Stephen Porges, Porges. He's got a book. I think it's called the Polyvagal Theory, and you could probably just look up a YouTube video about polyvagal theory because it's a pretty thick book. It's a it's a it's a big book. There's a lot in there, but essentially part of that theory is healing in community. There's more power there. And so you can access a greater capacity to heal when you feel heard, when you feel valued, when you feel understood, and when you feel supported in community. Your body can kind of like relax to a state that you can't get to being isolated and being on your own. And so that's amazing that naturally you figured that out and you found that community. That's an amazing thing.
Well, and I'm just thinking back because I think there were 2 things that are ways that I found the community, and one was a food co-op. So we had a food co-op in our town, you know, and the so we would do a monthly order, you know, and so I don't even know how I heard about it. Somehow I heard about it, and so I got into it, and so every week, this group of so this is back, you know, this is a good 15, but maybe 20 years ago. Every week, we would have one person, we'd take turns. One person would drive to this farm, you know, 50 miles or 20 miles. Like the farms changed over time, but to get raw milk and bring it back. And we would all go pick up our gallons of raw milk, you know, and so
Raw milk, that's so dangerous.
oh, I know. It's just incredible, right? It's the most incredible milk you can find. But you wanna check your dairy, make sure it's a good one, not, you know, all the things. But, let's see, realmilk.com. You can find places close to you. Look, you know, just check your state and all that. But and then we also monthly did an order from the trucks that supply Whole Foods and those kinds of grocery stores. Well, we don't have one here. We're a small town, so we have a food co-op. So those you know, so we would split like a case of, you know, organic broccoli or whatever, you know, all kinds of things. And so getting into that group, all these women were like-minded. You know, they were thinking the same things I was thinking. So that was one great way. And the other was I was going to say was other people that have a home birth. You know, I remember when I wanted to have a home birth, all of a sudden my mind was just changing. And I'd heard about this woman in our town that had had a home birth. And I wanted to meet her and talk to her. So I ended up meeting her at a church actually. And I went up to her, I was like 6 months pregnant. I was like, okay, I've heard you had a home birth. I want to hear all about it. And so little by little, you know, that was kind of another group that so it's, you know, through those things, you can kinda find people.
Yeah, you got to find your other freaks that you
And
align with. And
the homeschool world has a
yeah,
lot of natural health-minded people.
yeah, I
Yeah.
I agree. And just people that are doing things a little differently than the
Yeah,
mainstream.
yeah,
And but yeah, the power of community is very real. Is very
huge.
important.
It's very important.
And when especially when you're going through a difficult time
Mm.
and choosing to go a pathway that's not the norm, it is so important and so vital to have people
Yeah, I
around
mean,
you that are
because
supporting you in those decisions.
yes, you know, a lot of times when you are going to try to make something better with herbs instead of drugs, it's gonna take a little longer. Not necessarily, but a lot of times it might, you know, whereas, and so you may need some support, you know, you may need somebody that's just like, "Hang in there," you know, it's gonna get better, but it may not be like, you know, like a drug is gonna, make a symptom go away in 30 minutes, that kinda thing.
Yeah, it's a different process, right?
It
Because
is.
instead of
Yeah.
just focusing, as you mentioned, making the symptom, shutting up that symptom for a moment,
Mhm.
putting a piece of electrical tape over your dashboard where you got maybe the oil light on or something, you're focusing on figuring out what's the root cause and,
Yeah.
how do
Well,
we
like,
get the
for
body
instance,
to
like
heal
a
itself?
headache, for instance, you know, you could take a Tylenol for a headache, or what the first I got into essential oils, you know, a long time ago, and the first thing that I discovered was using peppermint oil, like, where it hurt and on the roof of my mouth, and it's gone. Like, I didn't need to take a Tylenol. So that's just, you know, of course, what's the root cause of that? Well, that's another subject, but
Well,
that's
sure,
just
yeah.
an example of
In the moment,
a
you just
different
need
way
the
to go.
headache to go away and maybe you can figure that out. Like you can think
Right.
through maybe the decision making paradigm that led to that headache in the first place. But so I want to get into the framework that you use because I love the way that you've organized it. And I would like to talk through some of these things. So I've heard you talk about body work, I've heard you talk about brain work, and I've heard you talk about world work. If you would define body work for us in a way that we could understand, and then maybe give us one or two elements from body
Yeah.
work.
Well, and if I could just back up a little bit, so the name of the book is 60 is a Good Start, which has a double meaning. So 60 meaning, well, when I turned 60, I kind of freaked out. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing with my life? I felt restless. I loved doing the natural health stuff, but I just felt like something needed to change. My kids were all growing up, going out of the house. It was just a change of things. And so 60 the age, it might be 50 for somebody, 70, just depends on when you kind of get to that sort of threshold area. But also, it means 60 days. So, you know who Dr. Caroline Leaf is? The neuroscientist.
Okay.
She's written a ton of books. I think she's about 70, 72 now. But she, can see under the microscope the nerve cells in the brain on the dendritic spine. There is what you see is you can see habit formation, and which is really long-term memory. It looks like a little umbrella as it forms. And so we know that it takes 60 days at the minimum to create a new habit. So this book is sort of a culmination of my interest in natural health, but also my interest in longevity. And, how do these people get to be 90, 100, more than that, and are healthy still? What's happening here? What are they doing? Well, we all know about the blue zones, right? You know about the blue zones. And I'll just say for your audience, if anyone doesn't know, they're like the 5 areas in the world where there are these large conglomerations of centenarians, 100-year-olds that are healthy for 100. I mean, they're living their lives. They live at home. They're walking down the street, so they're doing well. And why? What is it? So they looked at, what these people have in common. So I was looking at, the blue zones. There's some Harvard studies on longevity. There's some cancer studies on longevity. And all of this combined with natural health is what led to this book. And so what all of those had in common were these lifestyle habits, so I wasn't looking at, you know, what specific little things were, helping this issue or that issue. No, these were lifestyle habits. And they fell into 3 categories: body work, brain work, world work. So body work's the physical, brain work's the mental, emotional, spiritual, and world work is your purpose and your relationships. So in each of those 3 pillars, there are the big 5. So for body work, it's eat, drink, move, sleep, breathe. So what you're doing is you're taking within these parameters of these 3 pillars and the big 5 under each one, you're going to design what your 60-day dare is going to look like. And so there's even a planner that goes with the book specifically for the 60 days. You can do this on your own. You can do this with friends. I have a program. You can do it with me, whatever works. So, for instance, you might, like the first time we did some beta tests last year, and the first time I did it, I was like, okay, I'm going to do eat. That's going to be one of mine. I like people to choose at least 3. But eat, and I was going to eat 30 grams of protein every day before I ate anything else. Like I was just not getting enough protein. It was just hard. That was just hard for me to make happen. So I did that for 60 days, and this is like a year ago that I did that, and it's stayed with me. So like that habit took 60 days, it was the minimum. It could be up to 8 months. It depends on the person, the habit. Is it a physical habit, a thought habit? What is it? And so, that's one. You could decide to eat a certain way for 60 days. You could add some supplements, or you could take something away, just something in the what are you ingesting category. Drink would be drinking half your body weight in ounces of water a day. Some people just can't get that done. And so this takes real intention. So for 60 days, you're going to be real intentional about making these things happen, developing these habits, looking at your calendar. They're small things, and that's why they just can go by the wayside, right? And we just forget about doing them. But like I always say, we're great at keeping promises to other people, but what about to ourselves? I'm going to do that every day for 60 days. Are you? I mean, you got to like this is one of my favorite lines is your future is hidden in your daily routine. So, what do you want?
That's a good
Who do
one.
you want to be a year from now? Or 5 years or 10 years? Like, what kind of person do you wanna be? What do you
Mhm.
wanna be doing in your life? What are important things that you wanna be doing in your life? Well, is your daily routine getting you there or going to get you there? And so if it's not, then you gotta make some changes, and you gotta be just real intentional about it. So I feel like I'm trying to solve the problem of inconsistency. And so, moving your body, exercising, that's in there. Sleep, like number one way we recover from things, right? Getting good sleep, and then deep breathing exercises. That's a big one. People don't realize that, but so that would be body work. Those are the 5 under body work. So within those parameters, you're gonna decide what are you gonna do, for those
Yeah,
60 days.
I think that's great. And for different people, maybe doing the breathing would
Mhm.
be life changing for them because
Yes,
maybe all their life they've been a mouth breather, or maybe there's a variety of factors that could come into play there, and that could be life changing. But for somebody else, maybe it's one of those others, and I think that
exactly.
intuitively they probably know where they're falling
Yeah.
short once they learn a little bit about
Yes.
each of those areas. They probably intuitively know what they're supposed to be doing and
They
what they could
do,
improve
and,
on. Yeah,
there's you can be, "Oh, I'm good in that area, but gosh, this area I really need work," and there's a little, like, assessment, like 14 points where you're just gonna grade 0 to 1 to 10. Is it terrible or is it you're great at it? And you can see, well, whatever you rated the lowest, those are the areas you probably need to address.
absolutely. And it's simple, but that is powerful and profound. And making new habits, that's how you become a different person, and that's how you
Right.
get different results. And so that's
Yes.
a beautiful thing to be focused on, is aiming to improve consistency, because that's where the magic happens. It's
It
not
is.
doing this big powerful thing all at once in one day, going to get some biohacking treatment one time. Those can be great and can be very helpful, but real change happens with small things
Small,
consistently
consistent
done over time,
behaviors.
and
That's
that
right,
yeah.
that's right. I always say baby steps, you know, just it's baby steps, little by little, doing boring things consistently. But
Yes.
then, that becomes who you wanna be. I remember when I was 55, so I'm 65 now, so that was 10 years ago, and I was following this lady on Instagram, I guess it was, or whatever it was, and she is like an influencer. She's a little bit younger than me and lived in California, so I loved the California part because it was fun living out there. But she was a business person, so she was an online her whole expertise was in online business, and that's how I found her. Well, prior to that, I learned as I watched her, she was a fitness expert. In fact, she invented PiYo, which was a Pilates and yoga comp
Wow.
online.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
she had, like, the Guinness Book of World Records for the most exercise videos ever created or something like that. Anyway, she was funny, and I really liked her, and, I would just watch and she and her husband were very into fitness. They were into business, but the fitness part of their life, everything revolved around that. They would fly to another city for like a conference or something, and they would get to the hotel. The first thing they would do is find a local gym to go to. I was just like, "That's the last thing I would do,"
Yeah,
back
that's
then when I was trying to
the
get
very last thing.
consistent at
Absolutely.
exercise, which I didn't until I was 55. And, but, I remember thinking, I wanna have that fitness mindset, as a central aspect of my life, because if I don't, well, I'm not gonna be here, to have grandkids or if whatever, all those things. Or even if I am, I'm not going to be in good shape. So I thought at 55, I thought, oh my gosh, is it too late? But it's never too late.
I totally agree with that. I interviewed somebody recently and he said muscle is the currency of longevity.
That's right.
And
Yes,
so using your body and maintaining muscle mass and even building muscle mass
huge.
is possible
Hmm.
at all ages.
All
And
ages.
it's very beneficial because it
Yeah.
is powerful for metabolic health. And a lot of people don't recognize the importance of the metabolic function of the smallest unit, the cell,
Hmm.
and what that means for inflammation levels and your ability to produce energy and use energy and all the things. And so that's such a
Hmm.
powerful thing.
Yes.
So I love the idea of body work. Let's talk a little bit about brain work and what are the factors that go into brain work.
So I call those write, read, clear, meditate, and create. So write might is like journaling. So, you might be the person that needs to do a brain download every morning. You so much going on in your brain. You just need to get it out and onto paper. That's just a great process, right? For organizing your thoughts and figuring out what you need to do and all of that. Or, maybe it's journaling some grief or trauma, just maybe at the next level. It's like, we can do that, but sometimes we got to do it again. And sometimes we need to do it again, or just, any kind of journaling. So for some people, that's what they feel they need. So like a 10-minute session, you might do that for 60 days. Read would be reading something that's uplifting you, something that's improving you. Typically that's going to be nonfiction. Like 10 pages a day would be great. It would be ideal if it was in a real book that you're reading versus listening to, although I love Audible books, that's okay. Or podcasts, those can be improving you too. So it's that idea that, what goes in our eyes and ears goes in our heart and comes back out. So what are we putting in our eyes and ears? Something, uplifting. So that would be read. Clearer is to one of two things. One would be decluttering your house. We're doing a 60-day dare right now, and I'm doing a 15-minute clear session decluttering my house. This little area, that little area, and it's so great because that can just clog up the mind if there's just a bunch of junk everywhere, right? So that's wonderful. Or if you haven't done the sort of detox your house process yet, maybe most of yours have listening to you, viewers, but just getting the chemicals out of your house. Usually that's in the bathroom, under the kitchen sink, in the laundry room, but it's, what's your makeup, your skincare, your toothpaste, your shampoo, your soap, your laundry detergent, your cleaning supplies, getting we allow so many chemicals in America and that just, our skin is a sieve. What goes on our skin goes through to the bloodstream. We don't want that. That is one thing that will harm our ability to heal. So we want to get rid of all that stuff. I know the great stuff to buy if anybody ever needs help on that, but there's a lot of information out there, just something that's plant-based without the chemicals in it that you can't pronounce. So that would be, 60 days of like, okay, you got a 15-minute session. Say, go check, read your labels, make a list. What do I need to transfer out of here? Find where you're going to buy it, get it, buy it, so getting your house detoxed basically. And then meditate would be meditation, prayer, or affirmations, like a 10-minute session daily. And then create would be like I would say 30 to 60 minutes creative outlet session. So what could you do? I love to needlepoint. I've been doing that for about 5 years now. I'm addicted to it. It's like my reward at the end of the day, And I have my spot. I just sit down and start. It's all, my spot's all set up and ready. And, but in my book, I give a list of tons of things, which you could just Google. But, maybe cooking is your hobby. Maybe you want to do mosaic tiles on tables. Maybe, who knows, like some kind of creative outlet. And all of these things go to lessening stress. But there's studies on that it definitely lowers cortisol levels, that stress hormone.
I've
So
never
those are
heard someone say that needlepoint was their reward at the end of the day,
it is.
but there's a first time for everything. So
Yeah.
that's a beautiful thing. I love that.
Yeah. Well, it's needlepoint. You're creating heirloom quality items that will last way longer than I do, that my kids can have, and so it's kind of cool.
I think it is. I think it's a neat thing, and I love that so many of old school type of art forms and old school type of crafts forms are really starting to make a comeback, and
Oh
so
my
it's really
gosh, they
fun to
are.
see.
It's incredible. People are
Yeah.
trying to get off their phones. Stop
Yeah.
scrolling on their phones. That the needlepoint world literally in the last year, because I go to a lot. I'll travel around and go to the different shops, and because they're only in big cities. And every time I go in, I love to talk about that because they're all saying that this whole crop of, like, women in their 20s, and some guys too, 20s and 30s, are just all of a sudden taking hold of that art form. And the painters, they paint the canvases, they're way backlogged. It's just kinda cool.
It's so
Grandma
cool.
hobbies, they call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, as you pointed out, those hobbies, they're so good for your brain, lowering stress, lowering cortisol levels. It's an amazing thing to get involved with. Anything, besides maybe scrolling on social media or something like
Hey,
that,
right,
it's kind of
yeah,
detrimental.
uh
Um, and so then now we're moving on to world work. Was this where we fix the world? We call it, we figure out, how to get world peace? Is that what this is about?
Oh,
Or
not really. World work, it's funny, I called these body work, brain work, and world work before I homeschooled my kids. We did 1 year of Montessori school, and, they call everything for these little kids their work. You're gonna go pick up these blocks, that's your work, because work made it sound important, and I always love that, and so that was kind of part of why I called it this, but world work is your purpose that you're, doing in the world, and then your relationships. So under world work, we have dream, engage, gather, help, and act. So dream is for that person, like I was when I turned 60, that sort of doesn't know what their purpose is right now. Like it was something, raising kids and a career, just whatever it was, but both maybe. And now everything feels different. Everything has shifted. And so maybe you're restless. That was my feeling, was I was so restless. Like I wanted to wake up every morning and be really excited about what I was gonna do. And I wasn't feeling that at that time. So dream is 60 questions. This would kind of be journaling also, that you will just journal your answer to one question every day. Some of them, they don't take long at all. Others might require a little bit of thinking, but I really think those questions are going to lead you to what you could be doing right now. And our purpose does shift over time. It's not, it's the tendency to think, oh my gosh, are my best years behind me? And, am I just too old? I don't have a purpose anymore. But no, I don't believe that. I don't believe that's true till we die. And so anyway, that's what that is. And then on these world work ones, they're not, that one you would do every day for 60 days, like the body work and brain work. But the rest of these you could rotate through the week, because some of these, you don't want to do them every single day. But next is engage, and that's engage in relationships. So, when you're getting older, you might be a widow, you might be divorced, your kids are all gone. Maybe you live alone, maybe you are an introvert on top of that. And maybe you're just happy just being in your house and being alone. I get that because I kind of can be an introvert, but we have to be in relationship. They even say that's probably, of all the things that these longevity studies have in common, that might be the most important, is having relationships and engaging in them, that are meaningful. So if that's you, you might want to decide, okay, twice a week, I am going to purposely, consciously, do something in that category, like go to coffee with a girlfriend, or call my brother who lives across the country that I haven't talked to in too long, or, just some kind of engaging with other people, not a text. It could be a phone call, FaceTime, or, getting together, but something in that area. And then gather is on the spiritual side of things. All of these groups in the world of longevity had a spiritual community they were part of. And so that might be going to church weekly, or it could be a small group, or it could be one on one, but it could even be an online group if you like, that was where you found that. Something for the purpose of your spiritual life, right? That you're engaging with, gathering together somehow. Help would be volunteering. A lot of people find their purpose that way. You could try different things. You could just, I mean, that's a huge area, and there's so many. What I always like to caution people is that they don't do something they really don't wanna do, because it's so easy to get kinda pulled into things. "We need you to do this, we need you to do that." Yes, I know there's a time for that, even though you don't wanna do it, but I also believe that the people that wanna do it are out there, and if will pop up if you're not in the way,
Yeah.
right? Like, you might need to say, "No, I just that's not for me, I can't do that," and guess what? Someone else will. It just I see that all the time. So, do what you wanna do in that area, and that'll just I think God puts the desires of our heart in us. So, what
Yeah.
are they?
Yeah. What are you
What are
good
the
at? What are you
desires
gifted
of your
in?
heart? Right.
Absolutely. What do you love?
And then
Absolutely.
act as if you do know your purpose, or you wanna try some things, maybe you're gonna do that for, 30 minutes, an hour at least a day. For how many you would think if you were in that world work area and doing several things, you might wanna do one of those each day, or one of those 3, 4, or 5 days a week, something like that. But you're designing this for you in
That's
those
great. And
parameters.
this is such a powerful area. And you said something that I don't want to gloss over. You said relationship might be the most important factor in terms of longevity. What do you think it is about relationship that is so important and so valuable, maybe even more so than those other two factors?
I mean, I think that's what we were created to do.
I agree.
To be in relationship. It wasn't to be alone. And, it's like I so many times I think, the modern world is what it is. But 100 years ago, or maybe you could say 150 years ago and back, it was a whole different way.
Yeah.
People there was none of this technology. People even before the Industrial Revolution, because that really changed everything. People went from the farm to the factory. Families split up.
Yeah.
Kids went to school, and dad went to the factory. But before that, which is not that long ago, everyone was together on the farm, raising, doing what, and little villages, of course, little towns were created, but that was the life of everybody for thousands of years, at least, how who knows how long, but a
Yeah.
long time. And so I always try to ask that question, what did God intend here? Like, and I'm not saying God didn't intend for us to have the modern world that we have, but I sort of think the our our physical bodies have not really caught up with the modern. Gosh, we've now even got AI. I mean, it's just the craziness of it all,
Yeah.
right? And back then, you were in relationship with your clan or your you
Yeah.
know, anyway, yeah.
Absolutely.
We're
God
meant for it.
God made Adam, and Adam was alone, and God said,
Yeah,
"It's not good for man to be alone." And
there
so
you
he
go.
gave him a suitable helper, a suitable person to be with. He
Mhm,
provided community, and that's a beautiful
mhm.
thing. And the New Testament, the vast majority of the New Testament is about relating to others, forgiving others, bearing
Yes,
with one
yes,
another,
yes.
helping one another out, serving others, loving one another. I mean, that you can't read the New Testament and come away thinking that you ought to live off on your own all by yourself.
Right.
I mean, I guess you could, but you
Yeah, I
didn't
mean, you
do a
could.
very good job paying attention when you read it.
Yeah.
So I think community is such an important thing.
Mhm, it's huge.
And when we do those things that we're made for, I think there's inherent value, and God knew they were good for us anyway. if nothing else. And so he assigned those things for us to do. And you talked about it's never too late and you're never too old to make a difference. And there's a lady that she worked in ministry at her church. She started at age 75, volunteering in a ministry at her church. And then she retired from that ministry at age 100. And then she moved, she didn't have any family left. She had outlived everybody. And so she moved up to where we lived and was the aunt of a guy that went to our church. And so she was going to our church. Well, then she was living at a assisted living facility, and she stopped coming to the church. I said, "Oh, what happened to your aunt? Why did she stop coming?" And he said, "Well, they've got a little church service there, but only like 2 or 3 people were going, and she saw that, and so she wanted to make it her new ministry to go around and encourage the other people in the assisted living to attend the
Love it.
church service." And so at age 103, she's gathering people to the
Yeah.
little service. So she was still doing ministry, and
Yeah.
yeah, she
How
was
amazing to
very
talk to people
capable,
like
very
that.
sharp. Yeah, at 100
Mhm.
and I mean, she's probably still going now. I don't know how old she would be,
Yeah.
104, 105, but very
Yeah.
sharp, very capable, and, I
Yeah.
think relationship was a part of that.
Yes, absolutely.
So, first of all, I just wanna say thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your beautiful framework and for the work that you're doing. For the mom out there or for the woman out there that hears these things and they feel overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, there's so many things that I have to do. I've got to check off all these boxes, 5 on all these things, and I got to check all these boxes off to be healthy and to live a long life. What would be your message to that person or your encouragement to that person?
Well, to that person, it would be the baby steps concept, and it honestly, it took me a long time to figure that out or to, let me just say, embrace that. And I'll say it was when I was about 55, because I was always this person, and I think the TV industry kinda helped create this in me, but I was always sort of work hard, play hard. Like we'd be on a production, it'd be real intense. I'd be working, just way too many hours a day, go home, sleep, go right back, and then we'd be done with the production and then we'd just all crash and burn, before, and it was just that was kind of how I lived a little bit. And so consistency was definitely not what I was doing in the world of just taking care of myself. And we think we can just be that. And we think we're bulletproof, when we're younger. I mean, we do until we start like things start happening and then we're like, "Oh, wow, what is that?" And, this is just so common that, people that are older are like, "Oh, you need to start younger." But it is baby steps. Just pick one little thing and do that. If it's, I love that you have a lot of homeschoolers watching you, and it's so interesting because, like, well, there's such a wide range of them. There's the people that are just starting and they're just like trying to figure this out. And then there's people that have been doing it for 20 years and they're experienced and everything. But hang in there, homeschool moms, because you can do it and nobody loves your children as like you do. Nobody will ever love them
Mhm.
like you do. And I remember my first child was 2, and I put her in that Montessori class for the 1 year, and I was pregnant with the next one, and I remember looking at her through the window thinking, you know, "Wait a minute, they're doing what I'm supposed to be. I mean, God gave her to me. Why am I giving her to them, to school?" And I remember a lot of people were like, "What are you doing homeschooling? You're gonna ruin your life." I was like, "No, this is my life." And, yeah, that was one of the best things was deciding to do that, but yeah, baby steps, one step at a time. And one more thing I will just throw out there. Environment triggers behavior. This is something I say all the time. set up your environment to trigger the behavior that you want to trigger. If you don't drink enough water, make sure you have several of these in your house. Water bottles. I always have a bigger one up at my nightstand, and then I have one downstairs, and then I even have some plastic bottles. I don't like to use them as much, but just in case I'm running out the door and need to grab one, I can have water with me. Like, there's a huge number of ER visits are solved by hydration. People just aren't drinking enough water.
Yeah.
So put the vegetables and fruits at eye level in glass bowls in your fridge. So it's the first thing you see when when you open it, right? Set your tennis shoes out so you don't forget to put them on unless it's not a problem for you. If it's a problem, leave them in your closet. You will get them anyway, but put them out there so you see them. So I think that can help us to develop the habits that we want to develop.
That's great advice. If somebody wanted to learn more about you and wanted to learn more about your framework, wanted to buy your book, where would they go to do that?
Well, the book is everywhere, Amazon, wherever you buy books. There's Audible version too. And then my website is my name, AllisonMcCuneDavis.com. So you can go there to, check out the book or the 60-day DARE program or get on the mailing list for like the next one, that kind of thing. But I'm also on Instagram and Facebook mostly. So you can find me there too.
Thanks again for joining us and for sharing so much wisdom.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Discover Health podcast. Remember, your health is a journey, not a destination. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next week.